How much can your astrology chart tell you? What if you could tell what your past lives were just by reading a chart? This is Angelscapes, and I'm your host, Nancy Smith. Join me and Rob Stewart, an evolutionary astrologer and hypnotist, for a conversation about recognizing past lives in order to understand what you are working on in this lifetime. Rob's unique perspective on astrology has revealed roadmaps for releasing limited self beliefs so his clients can lean into their personal evolution.
Welcome to the Angelscapes podcast, where you're encouraged to uncover and develop a direct connection with your soul's power, wisdom, and spiritual intuition that is ready to blossom. We'll explore new ideas, compelling tips, and real steps to help you learn simple spiritual practices. We're a safe place to learn more about accessing your soul's power with education and spiritual wholeness that could bring more clarity to your life. Now here's your host, a practicing medium, Akashic Records practitioner, spirit artist, coach, and mentor, Dr. Reverend Nancy Smith.
So Rob is a professional evolutionary astrologer and a certified consulting hypnotist. He's out of the, I think, Andover area. He's out of
Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Yeah.
His path has involved moving through chronic disease and a shedding a 15-year science career that no longer felt aligned to his heart. We're going to check in a little bit about that science career. Since 2016, he has been supporting clients and letting go of limiting beliefs and old self-concepts, what you think of yourself, how you perceive the world. So welcome, Rob, to the show. And so glad to have you here. I want to start to say that I had you on the show because we had a session together, and it was very powerful, where you pointed out some things that I'd been struggling with that I could not put my finger on what was happening. And with looking at where the planets are, it started to make sense. And I'm still working on it, but I was thrilled, and I thought that you would be a great resource for people to know about. So thanks for agreeing to come on the show.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you, and it's a real honor to be on your show and talk about all this stuff. So, thank you.
Well, you're so welcome. So I'm going to come back to the science question because I didn't realize you had a science background. What kind of science was it?
It was hydrology, so water science. Worked in a university system for 11 years, and before that, worked at a environmental consulting firm and that sort of thing. So I loved it at the time, but this other work really demanded I focus on it more. My perspective on it, anyways.
That's wonderful, and Portsmouth is a great place to live, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's one of the most beautiful places in New England. But so what I want to ask you a little bit about evolutionary astrology. What is that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of astrology, and evolutionary astrology is just one of many, many, and it's one of the more modern versions of it, I guess you'd say. And um, it comes from the perspective that we live many lifetimes, and that as a soul we're learning, growing, and evolving through the school of life. And um, I've been you mentioned earlier, I do hypnosis work, and I've been doing past life regressions for a long time, and the evolutionary astrology system would just really fit in well. Um, and it's just something I've been into for a very long time, and I love it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So how did it work? Did you go into hypnosis first and then kind of develop the astrology, or?
Yeah, so technically I was working with clients with hypnosis before I was professionally reading charts. I've been into astrology for a long time, but I only started reading charts professionally in like 2020. And before then, I started working with hypnosis in 2016 with clients. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I feel like you're a very rich resource for really working through some of the bigger stuff that we all have to kind of face and look at. You mentioned a mentorship with Tom Jacobs from the Multidimensional Evolutionary Astrology School. What that was kind of, you don't have to talk about too much
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
It's a
Tom
mouthful. Yeah. It's a mouthful. Yeah, Tom Jacobs, he's definitely one of my mentors, great guy and a great astrologer. And so I've worked with him in his school, but also Stephen Forrest and involved with that school currently. And so astrology is something you always are learning more. And so yeah, I love it. I teach classes myself and and all of it, but I continue to learn and I love it.
So what do you teach out of?
Yeah, so I teach a past life astrology class, which is three courses in an entirety, and in it we sort of I teach folks to read the chart from a past life and current life perspective, and we pack it into 3 2-hour classes. And I teach that at Circles of Wisdom in Massachusetts, but I'm also I teach those online from time to time as well. So
Okay, so
yeah,
if people wanted to look you up, they could go to innercenterastrology.com. Inner
yeah,
Center,
yeah.
and yeah,
Or and Instagram inner.center, I think is the call thing on
okay,
Instagram.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So let's keep moving on to digging deeper. You said you trained with Dr. Brian Weiss for a little bit. That's exciting. Um, and how was that study with Brian Weiss?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, that was back in 2015, I think. And yeah, it was just an amazing week of training and diving into past life exploration. It was really great.
Oh,
Yeah.
did you learn hypnosis first and then studied with Brian Weiss?
Yeah, yeah. I was certified through the National Guild of Hypnotists. That was also 2015, and then I went on to work with Brian Weiss, and there's some others as well that did other trainings with.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, so and then you had a I just am looking at, I don't hope you don't mind, but there was this
Yeah.
fellow, Stephen Forrest,
What's that? What did you say?
astrologer Stephen Forrest.
Yeah, yeah. He's one of the grandfathers of evolutionary astrology, and I've done in-person trainings with him, and also involved in a school. And he's fantastic, and I really um, very grateful for his contributions and the things I've learned through his teachings. Yeah.
So let's take a little deeper dive into this unique perspective in astrology. Many of us have had our astrology charts read and have gotten a tremendous amount of awesome information. But when you read me, you knew that I had already had one, but there was things there that I hadn't heard before um, because you just totally went a different direction. So explain what you're seeing and what you're looking for and what people can walk away with, I guess.
Yeah, so evolutionary astrology is my background with this. It's sort of the perspective I take, but I also have a bit of a unique perspective in that the chart doesn't necessarily speak to what happens to us in life. It it really speaks to how we interpret what happens to us in life. And before the show, we were talking about this a bit, Nancy. If 5 people came into this room that I'm sitting in, they'd see 5 different things. They'd be honed in on 5 different things. And that life is similar to an ink blot. People are going to see different things, and because we've had past experiences, we've had past traumas, we've had past situations in life, and we become conditioned to see the world through a certain lens. And so astrology does a really good job of uh, summarizing what that conditioned lens that through which we see the world. And an example of this is, say a child was bitten by a dog, and understandably, that child might see all dogs as potential bites. It's valid, it's understandable, but it's not true because most of those dogs likely want to be that little girl's best friend. And so, we see the world through the lens of our traumas. We see the world through the lens of the situations we've learned and grown through. And astrology does a fantastic job of summarizing that, pointing to it, and also pointing to what you can lean into to shift from that old perspective reality. Because, if you ask five different people what's going on in life, you're going to get five different responses oftentimes. And sometimes it's like, how in the world could you think that? How in the world could you think that?
Where did you get that from this? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're all seeing the world through a different lens. And this unique perspective, or at least I think it's unique in astrology. I don't know. It may not be so, but to others. Um, but to me, it's rooted in the Course in Miracles. And one of the quotes in the Course in Miracles was the following. It was, um, the world is not the world that you see is not the world that God created. It's the world that we're seeing through our own interpretations, through our own judgments, our own labels, our own projections. And so, part of the journey as a human being, I think, at least from my view, is to let go of preconceived realities and overlaying it upon reality itself. And that's a really complex and tangled mess. But to me, that's part of the journey is trying to clear the lens through which we see the world. There's this old it's this great little story. I just want to tell it briefly, but
Please.
the story goes that there was a man and he was in his living room and he saw the neighbor. He saw her come out of the house and hang up dirty laundry on the line, to dry the laundry, but it was all dirty. And he's like, "What is she doing? She's insane." And then the next day, the same thing happened. She came out. She was hanging up the dirty laundry. It's like, what is wrong with her? And he became so mad with how silly that was of her hanging up this dirty laundry. But then on the third day he realized it was his window. The window was dirty. The laundry's clean. It's not a problem. So this is a silly version of this, but in all of our realities, the things that we're having to clean up within ourselves. The world is the way the world is. There's no changing the world. There is changing ourselves and our coming to inner peace with the perceived chaos. And trust me, I see a lot of chaos in the world. So I don't want to say I'm like above any of that, but I'm just saying, like, the thing we can change is within our own self. And astrology does a great job of helping find ways of, oh, this is an old perspective that I could let go of to find more inner peace,
Mm.
you know?
So how do you, this is a complicated question. I'm trying to think of how to simplify it, but how would you look at somebody's chart and where would you go to find perspectives
Yeah.
or influences from a past life or something?
Yeah. So it's a few things. In some respects, um, well, I'll just get to the point. I could go, it's a much longer discussion, of course,
I
but
know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But the big ones are the south node of the moon, um, which is not a planet. It's a calculated location in the sky. Um, and looking at the house and the sign placement of that south node of the moon, but also the south node ruler.
Mm,
And what that is it's the planet that rules the sign that the south node of the moon is in. Now, those are two of some of them. There's many, many more. There's Pluto, there's the 12th house, in my view. There's all these different elements that speak to past lifetime residualness. But it's a great question. There's not a simple answer because the whole chart, speaks to these things. In other words, the location of your sun itself. Um, there's a misunderstanding that say, and I forgot what sun sign you are, Nancy, but we don't need to talk about. We-
Yeah.
um, but say like an Aries sun.
Yeah.
Many people are like, oh, you're an Aries sun. That means that you must be courageous, bold, direct, and brave, and that must be defining who you are. And actually, that's not what the sun is. That person might be naturally brave, assertive, and all those things. But with the sun and Aries, they're actually learning to be brave, to be courageous. And so whatever your sun sign is, it's as if your sun sign is Aries, you're meant to be Ariesing. If you're Scorpio,
Everything.
you're here to Scorpio. Now, these things can be done on the high side and the low side.
Mhm.
And the high side is where it's at, of course. But of course, it can,
Awesome.
there's two sides to every coin, of course. But this is the thing, you know, if the sun is in the seventh house, it's very possible that in a past lifetime, they were focused on their independent life. And in this lifetime, they're here with the sun in the seventh house to focus on relationships. So
Okay.
life is looking for balance. It's looking for understanding.
Mhm.
And from my view, that's a big part of what reincarnation is all about. It's not about karma. You do good, you get good. You do bad, you get bad. There's certainly likely some truth to that to some degree, for sure. But what I find that is very true is that we're learning to navigate and free ourselves from some old concepts that we're stuck in. You know, in other words, um, if one's life has been inundated with their public persona, public life, and things like that, in this lifetime, there's something about their inner life and their home, their private life that there's more focus on to really shed some old self concepts and
Right.
like vice versa in really all areas of life. So, uh, I guess to answer your question, there's not just two or three or four elements in a chart that speak to past lifetimes. There's really everything is pointing to what's the soul's, for one word one could use is what's the soul's intention for living and learning and growing in this lifetime. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
You had said in when we were doing the chart, you said something. There are two things that they, for my opinion, they kind of conflicted with each other, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. But it was here to Sun and Sag, 12th house with Saturn or whatever, and I was to be a speaker, I was to be in front of people or be a teacher. But on the other hand, you saw a couple places where I had done this before and was either outcast or put to death. So there was a challenge. So it's
Mhm.
they didn't just ask me to have this learning experience. They said, and by the way, it's going to be really hard.
Yeah. So you're right. There can be these paradoxes, of course, in a chart, I've forgotten exactly what we were talking about at the time. The sun in the 12th house isn't necessarily meaning to be a teacher and things like that. So I just want to assure
Yes.
the viewer that we talked about a lot, a lot of the dynamics within the chart, but but yeah, that's the thing is, life is so um, uh, it's incredible and difficult, but beautiful. And to sort of put what you just mentioned in a story, um, and this is, as far as I know, a true story that came through past life regression. But you all can be the judge of that. There's a real mythos in this story, and that is, say there was a young child, and that child was brought into the woods by her parents, and her parents said, "Stay here, child, 4 or 5 years old. Here's some food. Don't move. Don't leave this place." And so the parents leave, and they never come back.
Mhm.
Now, to the child's perspective, going to be thinking about, oh my gosh, a 4 or 5 year old, they abandoned me. They They didn't love me. I didn't love them enough. I should have treated them better. They would have loved me more. All these thinking thoughts, 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 interpretations, interpretations, self-concepts. Now,
Exactly.
in reality, in this particular story, those parents went on to defend the caravan from invaders, and they were captured or killed. But they were in a difficult choice, and they made a choice. Some would argue it was the wrong choice, and that's fair. But the reality is that the child saying that, and using a very grim story, and I apologize for that, but the residual emotional felt sense in that lifetime, that short lifetime, might have been, I wasn't good enough. I didn't love, if I loved them more, they would have loved me more, or something, as if taking the blame, which it was clearly not true. And in
Yeah.
this lifetime, that person might be like loving, loving, loving the caregivers so, so much, trying for that not to happen when it was never their fault to begin with. And
Right.
so um, it's as if life is helping us recognize that some of these old self-concepts were never ever true. And but the emotional residual echoes from past lifetimes remain. And you mentioned until we release and recognize, and see, shed those old self-concepts. And in your case, there was you spoke to it briefly, and I've forgotten the details, but since we talked, but a story of a messenger who paid a big price for messaging. You know, now here you are being a messenger, and in this lifetime,
Yeah.
and I would imagine it's brought up a lot of fear and
Right.
echoes and emotional, oh boy, ness. And that's the echoes of old emotional residual
Mhm.
energy that is wanting to be released and freed um, from the
Mhm.
system, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, do you think people in the soul, on a soul level, and they're figuring out when they're going to be born and what their chart's going to say, or I don't know how they do it over there, but have designed to have certain things happen to them or have certain personality traits, or pressures, so that they could revisit something from a past life so they could deal with it in this lifetime? Do you think that's happening?
yeah, and I want to remind the viewer that this is my perspective. I don't claim to have the ultimate truth with any of this. That would be silly, obviously. So I just want to share that this is a perspective that that isn't mine. It's not like I've made this up, but it certainly aligns with many of the things that have been talked about. And that is that um, now, say there's something difficult that imagine that life isn't just a bed of roses. There is a challenge and a traumatic thing. Obviously, I'm joking here, um, and which can be very severe and traumatizing and horrific. Now, the from what I've learned, it's not about um, well, and these things are hard to communicate. Because some things go beyond words. And I do want to say this, that in the realm of karma, right? There's so much we don't know. Why in the world is someone born in a place where there's not enough food, or it's a war zone or whatever? No idea. And that gets into the realm of who knows? I can't understand that. There is the logical linear mind cannot grasp it, cannot comprehend it, right? So there's
Right.
that. And I'll put that one aside. Now, another element of karma is our beliefs. In other words, if I believe I'm not good enough, I'm going to play that out until I question it. That's just reality, and that's karma.
Okay.
Now, so karma, there's this idea of our beliefs and and then playing it out. So if we
Okay.
believe we're not good enough, if we believe this or that, even if it's not, you know, um, even if people are like, no, you're great, you're not going to believe them because you're believing that you're not good enough. So when we talk about shifting karma of what we can control, it's in the realm of what am I believing and what old self-concepts need to go. And so now when something happens in life, a difficult challenge, it's as if, from my perspective, um, and again, I want to be very clear, there's so much that it's like it goes beyond understanding, right? But
Right.
there's something about it also where how am I contributing to my own suffering? How
Oh,
am I, what am I believing about myself, you know, when this thing happens? Or what story did I write about that? And I'll give this example, and I think we probably talked about this in our session. Take for example, some puppy dogs in one of those videos of dogs being rescued on the side of the road, right? And those puppy dogs are abandoned, they're betrayed, they're no food, they're starving on the street, right? We've all seen videos on this online. And now in their puppy brains, they might be thinking, um, I'm unlovable. No one loves me. There's something wrong with me. But that's complete nonsense. As humans, we look at those dogs and we say, those are innocent puppy dogs. But they're in a difficult situation and they're creating a self-concept that's not true, right? Now, not ultimately true. Those puppy dogs hopefully are rescued by those humans, and those dogs remember that they're loving, loved, and lovable. And so, part of this journey is that we can't change the past, but we can change our interpretation of it. In other words, those dogs were always innocent. They were always loving. They were always, they might have forgotten that and they might have gotten angry and frustrated and, all that stuff. But imagine before those souls of those dogs even entered the bodies of those dogs, right? They might have been on the other in the heavens, whatever, right? And they look down and like, oh wow, there's going to be some puppies born in that really difficult situation, right? But someone's got to go down there. There's puppies being born, you know. I'll do it. I'll go down. I'll learn from that. Wow, it'd be interesting. I'll forget who I am and all that stuff for a brief moment. And so um, this diving into this deeper density, this sort of thicker density of this world, and forgetting our true self, feeling separated from source, all this different stuff. It's very gaslighting, but it's not true. And
yeah.
so these traumas that we experience, what I find, and I don't know for sure, but it's as if we're choosing to re-experience some old traumas to
Okay.
remember that this doesn't define me, to really look at it from the widest lens and see it from a perspective of just like those puppy dogs, innocent, loved, and lovable, and to free ourselves from any self-concept of some old interpretations of what that meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. So in that little group of puppies,
Yeah.
three of them, there's one that's very rambunctious and nothing's gonna get me down. It's very front forward. And there's another one that's kind of the runt, it's kind of quiet and shy. And then there's another one that's kind of a trickster and laughs at everything. So each one of those, that's people, different personalities. So are do you feel like you can see somebody's personality in the chart? How they present?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you know, anyone that's a great example. It's like anytime you see a newborn, it's not a blank slate. There's a world in there, and astrology really does point to that world and the innate um, flavor of that expression
Mhm.
of that person. And of course, it doesn't pigeonhole it. There's plenty, astrology, there's 12 signs. It's as if putting all of life into 12 bins. There's a lot of room in each one of those bins for a huge variety of expressions in life. So um, in some astrologers online or otherwise, I, I I really push against any of the fatalistic views. So like this means that and this therefore this. No, there's uh to me, true astrology is infinite and potential and expansive. And there's nothing rigid about it whatsoever. But there is elements of if you were to look at someone's chart, you could likely, from my perspective, identify the more reserved, the more outgoing, the more, all sorts of the different gifts and expressions,
Right.
and the chart does speak to that.
Yeah, yeah. So I can imagine, I don't know that much about astrology, so looking at a chart, but you must see so many different variations on a theme.
Yeah.
Or you could, and then do you feel like in somebody's chart you could see the best way for them to go forward? Because you talked about a roadmap. Astrology is a roadmap, and for releasing limiting self-confidence concepts, I can say that. But I also feel like it's a roadmap for a lot of other things too. Like what if this is your forward personality, or these are where your strengths are going forward to solve this, here is showing up here and here and here, as opposed to telling somebody just get over it. Yeah. Or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. Is there?
Right. Yeah. There's no getting over it type of language, and this is um, right. So, I mean, I just want to mention that, there's a lot of talk out there, of course, about manifestation and all that, right? And it's a very real thing, at least from my perspective. But there's a lot of, I would say, spiritual toxicity through trying to control and manifest and all that stuff. Now, but in terms of when I talk about old self concepts, I'm talking about our old stress, our
Mm,
old worries and fear-based thinking. These are things holding us back. And the chart does a great job of understanding why that might be so. Your particular and my particular and everyone's particular negative thinking and holding us back and that sort of thing. And to me, it's not about like, hey, well, it'd be nice if we could just get over it, but it's valid. Anyone that's lived my life, your life, anyone's life, the way they feel is understandable. It's valid, and um, and it's rooted from my perspective, in past lives, echoed in this life and early life, and all that stuff. And so, it's you know, to me, it's through that gentleness and self-love that we can only do for ourselves, in a way of helping those wounded aspects of our psyche and those little puppies feel loved, loving, and lovable, right? And but not only is it, like you said, letting go of any old concepts of who we are, it's also about embracing the new expansive potential that's outside of the old rut that we've had in many lifetimes, the old conditioned patterns. And the chart does speak to, at a soul level intention, where do you want to go in life? That sort of thing.
yeah. Yeah. So here's where you've been, here's where you are now, and here's where you could go. So it's
Right.
beautiful. Because sometimes how is this happening to me? Where's this from? And knowing it
Yeah.
from yeah, that one piece where you explored things that happened to me in a past life because I was a speaker or teacher, and that cleared up what I was struggling with, so that I could step into, well, let's make this easy. Let's not decide this concept. Let's not decide this already. Let's try it a new way.
Right. And I want to be really clear that, when I talk about past lives, it's in a really arm wavy type of thing. Who knows what the exact story is of the past lifetime and what happened? Like, who knows? But the reality is that, as human beings, we're sort of watching movies in our mind about the past or about the future. And, that movie that's just playing in our mind about fearing about the future, worrying about the past, all those different things, astrology speaks to perhaps what that root cause is of that sort of trance that we're all in, of watching movies in our head about the world or about the past and about ourselves. And there's remedies for leaning out of that old pattern. So, anyways, I'm sort of um,
Yeah.
repeating myself, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's move a little bit into the hypnosis work that you do within past life regression. Um, we were doing the hypnosis first, and then you realized there's this thing in astrology that's great. How would you work with a client, or how can it help a client who's kind of working with the astrology and then doing a past life, or vice versa? Just
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been studying astrology for a long, long time, but I started working with clients in hypnosis before I was reading their charts for them. Um, but you, the interesting thing between the two, the people that seek me out for past life regressions um, are usually, sort of spiritual tourists, like, what's up with this past life stuff? There is, all this stuff, and you get a lot of that. But, you know, and Brian Weiss has documented this very well, but there's something about revisiting what could be past life memories. I'm not able to say this one's true, that one's not true. This one, that's up for each person to decide for themselves. I have my guesses, but Dr. Brian Weiss has really seen, and I see it as well, that as these sort of old memories are recognized and experienced and released emotionally and energetically, um, there's shifts that occur. And I don't know why that is. And I'm not sure, I'm not able to describe the science behind that, if there is even a science behind it. But it's as if seeing things from a different perspective can help shift our perspective on similar elements in this life. And I don't know, it's seeing it in a new way. And
yeah,
it happens to help shift everything. And the amazing thing is that the chart really does speak to the type of story that they go into in a past lifetime. And this has been remarkable. I've seen this, I've done hundreds and hundreds of past life regressions, and um, the um, the stories that they dive into in without any discussion beforehand always mirror the chart. I really trust the archetypes and the symbols in the chart. They're always on target. You never know exactly what happened, but the general spiel, the general themes. I've learned to trust the symbols.
yeah. That's interesting. So would you have somebody do the hypnosis first and the chart second, or if somebody did their chart, is they going to be influenced by their chart, or
That's the chicken the egg question in my line of work. People ask me that all the time, and I really say it's up to them. Um, the scientist in me wants them to do the past life regression first, so I don't provide any information and kind of load any ideas and concepts in their head. So, um, from that perspective, the past life regression is wonderful first. However, those that want to have a bit more targeted approach and things like that, it can be helpful to talk with them about the chart. Um, and there's in the hypnosis world, I see people for regular, ordinary stuff with hypnosis. Smoking, weight loss, all those real challenges in life. And um, but the reality is, we all have limiting self concepts. We all have limiting beliefs and old stressful thinking. And hypnosis is one way to really help let go of that And so when people are looking to really shift some old beliefs, that's when I say, oftentimes the chart reading can be helpful first.
Yeah. There's years and years ago when I first started learning about past lives. I'm trying to remember who the woman was. I think her last name was Brown, but maybe not. It was way long time ago. And she was talking about if you remember something in a past life that's bothering you in this lifetime, that remembrance will heal what's happening in this lifetime. Do you find that to be true?
What was that? Could you repeat that?
Um, if if say you had a chronic backache
Mm,
and you
yeah.
went into a past life regression, I guess your intention would be to find out what's going on with this chronic backache, and you have a memory of falling off a horse and breaking your back, and just that remembering that when you come back, your back when you come back, your back is it's stronger. It's not hurting so much, if you follow what I'm saying. Do you find that when we go in and have those memories, retrieve those memories, that it heals this life?
I um there's it's unfortunately it's not in every time in every case, so I'm going to be very clear that yes, I've seen things like that, but also seen not that as well. So I want to be very clear to the viewer that, like, you find that thing and you're never going to have that back pain again. But for some reason, like I said earlier, there really is something to helping those energies shift in some way. But for some, there can be major changes. For others, it's much more
Mm,
subtle.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Just was curious because that was one of my myths that I brought forward for
yeah.
many. I have a question coming from somebody who's watching us. She wanted to know, does our chart also give us knowledge of our gifts and where we might create that new expansiveness?
100%. Yeah. And, I've been harping on the old self concepts because that is a major element of moving forward, of course. But the chart absolutely points to the gifts. It points to the soul's intention from my perspective of, what might, you, want. And it's never a surprise, so I want to be clear, like, I always tell people when they sit down with me, please use your own discernment and all that. I'm just reporting on what the astrology suggests is part of this life journey. And so the chart always points to the gifts. We all have gifts. There's not a single there's not another Nancy out there just like you with your unique, set of gifts and all that stuff. So yes, 100%. The chart speaks to that. It speaks to the type of vocation that is quite aligned in regarding work and um, but also, how might you interact with the community, with the larger world, and where are the real opportunities, and to just sort of bend that probability curve of your life into working with energies as they come up, to work, to embrace the learning, to lean into more happiness and fulfillment in life. That's its real strength. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds wonderful. That's more like what I would like to look for.
Yeah, right, right.
I know where I've been. I know where I don't want to be there. But it's also very cool to hear, yes, that is a real thing in your life. It's showing up in your chart. It really is that. And you can do something about it. And here's where your gifts are. That
Right.
seems like a beautiful full circle um reading. Do you have any other things that I haven't thought of even talking to you about that you love to do with your clients that you
Yeah.
or some stories?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's tons of stories regarding past lives and stuff. Um, yeah, it's a great question. It's a really great question. Um, yeah, do you have any any thoughts? There's so much, I work better with questions.
Yeah,
Um,
I know.
but
So
I'm trying to think of some,
so
there's been a, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, there's I know a lot of people love to have their chart explored, and they're sort of hesitant. They're not, or they're hesitant about going forward because they don't know what they're going to experience. I
Mhm.
remember going through this past this it's a class of past lives, and we were taken through a series of past lives, and I was sitting, and so he said, "Do you have any questions or any concerns?" And I raised my hand. I said, every single one you die. And people thought it was really funny, but I was trying to express some of the death experiences. I didn't like seeing them, or I didn't like messing with that memory. And I just was so going with that perspective. Um, what are some interesting, or what kind of client, what would you tell a client who's afraid of
Yeah.
working with lives because they're going to experience a bad death?
Right, right. Now, you know, um, there's, as we're moving through, so in a past life regression, and during those sessions, we're having a conversation. It's quite different than a group setting where everyone's kind of going through their own experience. In a one-on-one session, we're having a conversation, we're talking and things like that, and you know, I I often share with them, at any moment you can detach, see this from as if you're floating above the scene, and these past life regressions, it's not about going in there as a warrior and, ripping the curtain down and seeing the whole story and all it's not about that. It's, it's about gently and noticing, watching, and being an observer and just observing it um, um, in these sessions I always I tell people I invite, and during the session I invite the highest capacity of the totality of them to help facilitate, to help hold space for the session. And this is my way of inviting the higher self, um, your guardian angels, whatever, you, capital Y, capital O, capital U, And so this isn't about watching a scary movie. This is about whatever the next layer of the onion is and the sort of spiritual journey that they're on, to help shed light on whatever that is in terms of past lifetimes. And you know, people are very, very often surprised about that that scene when they leave the body, and they're watching it from a different perspective, and they're you know um, so it's and what I think really helps all that is that it's a past lifetime. In other words, of course, in this lifetime, we're like, oh, those things are a bit scarier. But you're in a body. And it's the same thing that, like, if I were to tell you, Nancy, like, Nancy, know a whole lot of things more than you knew when you were 5 years old, when you went through that difficult time. And the first thing is, you made it through. You're here now, right? And that's the same thing, with these past life regressions that, you know, um, I think, you know, of course people sometimes come in worried about that sort of thing, but I find they're quite relieved when they're leaving and things like that.
Have you done life in between lifetimes with some
Yeah.
have they
Yeah.
how that's an amazing experience. How do you find it? And do you ask people to specifically go to a lifetime in between lifetimes, or do they just go there kind of automatically? Or
It, 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 it depends. Some people are specifically interested in that, of course. Um, for others, sometimes they're just skipping right over that. Um, yeah, I always like to dive into those things, but sometimes it's skipped over, and there they are, and in a new lifetime in their journey. But you asked what that's like, and um, it's a really beautiful thing. There's obviously a lot of different variations of it all, but of course, people feel this lightness and as they're leaving the body and drifting and floating and this, returning with loved ones and the healing places. And it's again, it's very unique from person to person, but there's always this receiving healing part of the journey, which is really wonderful. And I'm always I give people as long as possible in that space because even when I ask the question, what's happening now, they're kind of like, I'm resting right now, and it's amazing how potent that can be when they're in that space. Um,
Yeah.
and discussions with angels, guardian angels, and things like that, and clarity on more on what they're choosing in this lifetime. And of course, I can't know this to be the end all truth of it all, but I've seen this enough to really think there's really something to it, and it's uh, um, quite similar to many of the near-death experiences and the stories that people talk about. All that, I want to be very clear, very different experience. Um, Doing a past life regression and a near-death experience, very different.
Totally
Two
different.
separate things. Be very clear about that. But the stories regarding life in between lives are
Yeah.
similar. That sort of element.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a past life, life in between life, past life, and I went in between. And it's this memory of being a little girl, passing as a little girl about I think 8 or 9 years old. And maybe a little bit younger. And when I got to heaven and I was, what's going on here? It was so much fun. It was like a big carnival with a lot of bright colors. There were people that I knew. There's lots of candy, and there were a lot of there was a toy soldiers
Yeah.
and then I watched myself progress into the awareness of being a soul or being an adult or whatever. I started to have to adult, but I could be a kid for as long as I wanted to. But it was a beautiful experience of meeting me where I was
Hmm.
and not expecting me to be anything but my age and where I was. I just wanted to share that because it was so lovely. And I didn't have any fear. So
Yeah.
that was something that I brought. I don't know why it was important for me to bring that back to my
Yeah.
aware self once I woke up, but I just wanted to share that
Yeah.
story for some reason.
Beautiful. Yeah.
But people, if they want to find you, it's Rob Stewart. It's at innercenterastrology.com. And you can also find him in Instagram in inner.center.
Yeah.
And but do reach out to him. And this podcast goes along with many other Angelscapes podcasts. You can go on my website, angelscapes.net, and find this podcast again. You can go on YouTube and you can find Angelscapes podcast anywhere on the podcast platform. Um, so Rob's going to be everywhere in about by Friday.
I do want to mention quick, my hypnosis website is a different website. It's
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
um, theinnercenter.com is my hypnosis website. So I have an astrology website and a hypnosis website, theinnercenter.com.
Theinnercenter.com. So, but it doesn't matter how they reach you.
No,
You
it's fine. Yeah, you can reach me through either of those. But for those specifically interested in past life regression, that website will have more on that
information
topic.
about that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I love having you on. Any last words you want to add?
No, it's great to chat about all this, and I appreciate it, Nancy, to and you inviting me on your show. It's a lot of fun, and it's great
Yeah.
chatting with you.
Well, we can have another chat some other time too about going deeper into I like that you made some good statements about Course in Miracles. And so there's a whole beautiful spiritual healing aspect to all of this as well. So
Yeah,
I like to bring people onto this podcast that are available and have a beautiful way of looking at life, something unique perspectives that would help the right person at the right time. So I invite you all to, whether you're listening to it live or listening to it later on a podcast, Rob Stewart is out there, still out there. So look for innercenterastrology.com or innercenter.com and try him out. Give him a call or give him an email or whatever, however you connect. And because this is about your soul's journey. This is about you guys going forward, leaning into your own evolution, as so well put by Rob. So for now, I want you to consider where your soul path is and where you want to go, and have a wonderful life. Stay safe and stay connected and keep on keeping on. And so that's it for now. And I'll see you next time. Thank you again, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining the Angelscapes podcast. We hope you've gained new insights and inspiration for your journey to uncover and access your soul's power. For more information and a deeper dive into finding clarity in your life, go to angelscapes.com. Remember to subscribe so you can be part of the discussion. It may just change your life. See you next time.